So we have come to the last lecture of this section. And here we want to cover an advanced example, which is called GetPivot Data. Now you notice that even if you write the function without a pivot table, it still works. Even though you're not really supposed to use a GetPivot Data function like this, you're supposed to use it automatically whenever you have made a pivot table. So I want to create a simple pivot table. We want to keep our subcategory, our sales value, and let me remove the decimal places like we have been doing so far. And we also want to keep our category. Now notice this very, very carefully. Imagine that you wanted to track a certain value. That means this is the value that I wanted to track. Maybe my appliances, which is in office supplies. Now, if I say equal to B10, you notice that it is showing you the number. But the problem is that the moment there is a change that happens to the pivot, for example, if I put my category not in my row but in my column, you notice that this number is changing and it is now showing you the new value that is appearing in B10. Makes sense, right? Now, you can't really blame the formula because you linked the cell to B10, which means that whichever is the new value that is coming in B10 will be shown to the user. But that's the problem, right? We don't want this to happen. We want the user to be able to track a value no matter where it goes on the pivot table. And this is how we do it. Let me put my category back where it was. So what we want to do here is, I want to put an equal to sign, and rather than typing B10, I will click on the cell B10. Now you notice you get this large formula, and let us see how this is working. Now sales is my data field because we are looking at the sales value. A3 is nothing, it is just the pivot table. That means it is the first cell, the top left cell in which the pivot table is starting. Category and office supplies is the field and the item. That means that we are looking at a specific category, which in this case is the office supplies. And then we have another field and item. That means that in my subcategory, we're looking at appliances. Now see what happens. The number is 1010536. Now, despite the fact that I'm moving category into columns, you notice that the number doesn't change. For that matter, even if I change the layout, if I go to design, and let's say I change my report layout to tabular form, despite the fact that this number is not in B, it is shifted to column C, you notice that it is still able to track that number. And that is the power of using Getpivot Data. Now, if you're smart, you can even use Getpivot Data a little bit like VLOOKUP, and this is how you do it. Let us first change the data back to how it was. So we put category above our subcategory. We want to create two drop-down lists. So in the first one, we will go to data validation, and I want to select a list which has furniture, office supplies, and the third one is technology. So the user can choose between any of these three categories. And then in the second drop down, we want to keep the 17 subcategories. Let's just quickly type them. So we have bookcases, we have chairs, furnishings, tables, appliances, art, binders, envelopes, fasteners, labels, paper, storage, supplies, accessories, copiers, machines, and then finally phones. Again, you notice the user can choose between any of these 17 drop-down options. Now what I want is that when the user chooses office supplies and chairs, the result should be the combination of those, which means that it should be the intersection of office supplies and chairs. So this is how we do it. I will say that the user can choose the category here and the user can choose the subcategory here. So watch carefully. We want to write an equal to sign and then simply select any one of the items. It doesn't matter which one we select. So purposefully, I'm not choosing office supplies and chairs. I'm going to choose, let's say, furniture and chairs. Now you notice we get this formula, and obviously right now it is showing us the value for office supplies, or rather furniture and chairs, which is 1.5 million. What we want to do is, very smartly, we want to change this item. So rather than making furniture as a constant, we want to choose the value written in G5, which is office supplies. And rather than making chairs as the constant, we want to choose I5, which is the subcategory chosen by the user. And let me quickly check that. Okay, so that combination doesn't really make any sense because office supplies don't have chairs in them. But we can simply change office supplies to, let's say, appliances. And you notice it tells us office supplies appliances is 1010536. If I choose office supplies and, let's say, envelopes, it gives us 169217. Now to avoid the error that we saw earlier, for example, what if a user accidentally chooses chairs? So we don't want to show this reference error. We can simply write equal to if error, and if there is an error in this entire formula, then the result should tell the user choose a subcategory that belongs to the category. And this way the user gets a message, which means that if they have accidentally chosen a combination that doesn't make sense, it will not show a reference error. It will tell the user what is the issue that is happening. Now, as a matter of fact, you can do this even on a different sheet. But first, let us see, will it work if my pivot table changes? Notice carefully, if I put my category in column, you notice the formula still works. If I go to design and I change the report layout to outline, it still works. To make it work on a different sheet, let's just cut it and then put it on a different sheet. And now one small change that we will have to make is to make sure that A3 is not linked to the current sheet, but to sheet 5. As you can see, sheet number 5 is where my pivot table is. So this is really cool because now you can select something here without having to go to the other sheet and then do it manually. So while it requires a little bit of effort, learning how to work with Getpivot Data is of paramount importance because once you get comfortable working with it, it's not a particularly difficult topic, but once you get comfortable working with it, it can help you automate a lot of your formulas.